So this is SW321, SW421 software project management, and we're talking through Wysocki's Chapter 8, how to launch a traditional project management project. And as it says, and every one of these 5 chapters says, using tools, templates and processes to, in this case, launch a TPM project. And the things you need to be able to do are recruit the team, kick off the project, establish how the team's going to work, figure out how you're going to manage scope changes, figure out how you're going to manage team communications, assigning people to do stuff, figuring out how to move people around so that nobody's too overworked, finish up the project schedule, and then figuring out the work packages. So you need to recruit the project team, and there's various parts of the team operating rules that you need to scope out before you kick things off. And as I said, there's a management process for scope and a management planning for communications, the work packages, and the resource assignments. So what is a project team? It's a group of professionals committed to achieving common objectives who work well together, relate directly and openly with one another to get things done. That's the key part. You've got to get things done. And there's a list of possible people before in the team. The co-project manager from the developer and the client's perspective, the core team, the key people who are going to be doing the project, the developer team, which we've got to choose now, the client team, which we've also got to choose now, and any outsourcing or contracted team we need, we're going to choose during launching as well. And there's a list of things that you want on the core team, and sometimes you don't know whether the people you've got on your team are all of those things. But you need to figure that out. You need to get their buy-in to be able to do this stuff. The people who are members of your team from the client, they must understand their own business unit processes, and they must be able to make decisions and commitments from the client viewpoint. If they can't, then they're not much use to you executing the project. So the people who you want from the outsourcing or contract team, they should have little variance in the times they're available. They should know how their tasks relate to the project. They should have you should figure out whether they have a commitment to getting the project done. You need to keep an eye on the quality of the work, and the bottom line is they may require more supervision than the core team. The core team will live or die on the execution of the project, whereas sometimes the contract team, it's not necessarily in their complete interest to do everything correctly. So you need to be a little vigilant. So you need to figure out how the team's going to be deployed and what the development plan is for the team. Every team can improve the way they do things. No matter how good they are, no matter how efficient and well organized they are, you can always do better. Work methods and procedures, the technology you're going to use, keeping people on board and attracting good people, being able to be flexible with staffing, all of those things. You can always improve some aspect of the way you do things. And yeah, you've got to have open communication. You've got to be able to listen as well as talk. You have to have shared goals. You have to have a positive outlook. Creativity helps. You've got to be able to respect others. You can disagree with others. That's okay. But you've got to respect them, and you've got to respect the decision that's made, even if it doesn't go the way you think it should. And you've got to be have the what is sometimes called the abundance mentality. You've got to be into growth, you've got to be into learning. So when you kick it off, you want to first of all introduce the sponsor, the importance of the project to the sponsor, the project, and the project manager, right? And then you've got to take what came into this launching meeting, which is the project proposal, and write the project definition statement, which is a slightly different document. You've got to establish the operating rules for all of those aspects, amongst others. You've got to review the plan to see that it still makes sense, given that you've now got people on board, more people on board. You've got to finalise the schedule, and you've got to write work packages to get that schedule done. So the project definition statement expands on the project overview statement and on the objectives, and then the assumptions, risks, and obstacles. So the purpose, there's a list of things that should be in the purpose. So now let's talk about some of the operating rules, right? There's a 5-step process to solving a problem. Define it, gather data, generate ideas, evaluate and prioritize the ideas, and then develop an action plan. There are several ways you can make decisions. There's directive, where the decision comes down from on high. There's participative, where a lot of people get involved in things. And there's consultative, where the higher-ups make the decision, but they consult with the experts on the area. And be careful with conflict resolution. Sometimes conflict is good, right? You want to have a different idea. Sometimes conflict is bad when you've got one person with their own idea and they cannot take on board anybody else's idea. Their idea has to win, and that's almost never a good idea. And there's various ways you can resolve conflict. You can avoid it. You can be combative and have a big argument and resolve it that way. Or you can be collaborative and work around, find common ground, and then hopefully find a commonly agreed solution. Sometimes consensus building is a good idea, but be careful. Just because it satisfies all parties, it can be a bad decision. There's a thing called groupthink, where people within the group all of a sudden decide that one thing is the right thing to do, and whereas if somebody outside the group had given them some information, they may have realised it was a bad thing. Groupthink is a well-documented behaviour amongst groups of people. I think you're probably all aware of what brainstorming is about. You get lots of people with knowledge of the area together. You throw any and all ideas on the table. You get all of the ideas on the table. You discuss the list. You mix and match the solutions, and you test each idea with an open mind. And usually you get better solutions that no particular individual could identify, but the group discussion can. I think I've said, and I've put together an assignment about meetings. Be very careful with meetings. They have to have a purpose. They have to have a use-by date. Don't invite everybody just because. The answer to do we need an agenda is yes. The answer is to are there minutes is yes. and there should be action items in those minutes. If there are no action items in those minutes, there was no point in having the meeting. Listen to that podcast that I point to in the assignment, even if you're it's an optional assignment for the SW321 students, but listen to it. It's kind of interesting from a meeting perspective. So, prime thing is the meeting necessary? And all of these things are pretty good. Start and end the meeting on time. So during the meeting, keep to that time limit. Do gather input from the participants. It's not just a one-way street. It's not just one person talking. Use visual aids if you can, graphs, images, whatever helps the situation. As you go through the meeting, summarize what the results of the discussion were. Don't wait until the end to do it. At the end, you should go through a list of the action items, but summarize as you go, particularly if there's more than one item on the agenda. So after the meeting, figure out how you decide when you need another meeting, and yes, make sure that the action items are followed up. Sometimes it'll be the meeting caller who follows up, sometimes it'll be their delegate or somebody else. Right? Project meetings, daily status meetings, problem resolution meetings, project review meetings. These things happen daily, is obviously daily. Problem resolution will happen on an ad hoc basis when there are problems. And review meetings happen maybe once a month, maybe once every 3 months, depending on the size of the project. Right, so it's a stand-up. 15 minutes, everybody stands, only reporting on the tasks open for work and not yet done. I'm on plan, I'm X hours behind, and need help. I'm X hours ahead and I'm available to help. For problem resolution, only bring those into the meeting who are involved in the problem, and then figure out what the parameters of what you want out of the meeting are. Project review meetings are more formal. They're usually held with the C-suite, the CEO, the CFO, the head of engineering, and it depends, but they're to keep tabs on the project performance for the high-level executives. Sometimes it's good to have a team war room where you can all sit together and work on a particular problem. There are variations on it where sometimes you need quiet or private areas as well. So it all depends on the sort of problem you're working on and the people involved. So here's a sample change management process. You submit the change request, you review it, and either you reject it, or you ask for more work, or you request an impact study. You get the impact study, and you either reject it or request rework, and then you approve the change. You cannot just go straight to the requirements and change the project. So the main thing is, what is the expected benefit of the change and what's the detriment of the change, right? And all of those things can be a benefit or a detriment. It can be improve or disimprove cost, schedule, and quality. Might take away people that you really need to do other stuff. So that impact statement has to be done. And there's lots of possible outcomes. Maybe you can't do it. Maybe you can do it within resource and time restrictions. Maybe you need more people, maybe you need more money, maybe you need more time. It all depends on exactly what, and then somebody is presented with that impact statement, and then they can make a decision, an informed decision about what to do. And here's a sample change request form. And it's just some tips, because the client is often the one who is requesting the change, and they need to know what it's going to impact them. Is it going to cost them more? Is it going to delay them? What's the issue? So oftentimes a management reserve is set aside to cope with contingencies. This is relevant to the project buffer that I've talked about. And it should be used, like I said. So the scope bank, this is again a way to manage that extra time, and it's a way to make sure that if anything new comes up, and it almost certainly will, you have some overhead to deal with it. If you're completely committed on all your resources with the currently known state of the project outcome, then you're not going to be able to cope with anything. So you need to have that overhead, that scope bank, to be able to make a withdrawal, to be able to do that extra stuff. So team communications. You need to have timing, content, and channels. Right, so here's the process. Somebody generates the idea, encodes the message, transmits it through a channel. The receiver decodes the message, checks the meaning, and gives feedback. And you need to give that feedback, particularly if the sender is on our project team and the receiver is on the client team. That feedback is essential to be sure that you understand, that the client has understood what you've said, and you've understood what the client has said. And there's a continuum of communication types, one-to-one all the way down to written reports. One-to-one is two-way, written reports is one-way. And best off going through the project manager for most communications. If you don't, here we've got 7 nodes that we need to go through. If we didn't all go through the project manager, and so we've got 6 communication channels, then we would have 7 times 6 divided by 2. So what's that? 21 different ways we could communicate, and that just ends in tears. Right, and here's I think we talked about a Wysocki matrix before. Who's responsible, who needs to approve, who gives support, who's able to coach and consult, and who needs to be kept up to date with what's happening. And this is just an expanded version about when things should start and end, and relevant to the tasks that are happening. Assigning resources, right? So you want to be able to make sure nobody's overworked. You want to make sure everything gets done on time, and that may mean you need to decompose things, right? So instead of having one 2-week task that has problems being pulled apart, you may want to split it into 3 4-day tasks, or 3 3-day tasks, right? And sometimes you can stretch those tasks, so instead of a full-time 3-day task, you make it into a part-time 5-day task. So here's the we've got our network diagram now, but now we've decided who's doing what and when, and you can see that we've tried to keep people's Saturdays and Sundays free, and then there's a little bit of slack at the beginning and end where those some of these squares are half coloured for people. So a work package is a brief description at the subtask level that describes how a task will be completed. It's like a primitive project plan. It should be written for critical path tasks, high-risk tasks, tasks requiring scarce resources, and tasks with large duration variances. Here's a work package assignment sheet, and we've got various people assigned to the work package A, B, C1, C2, etc. There's a work package description form with the tasks listed and the various information about the project and the task start and end date, etc. And that's about all I have to say about launching a TPM project. So we'll move on to the monitoring and controlling in the next video.